Good morning and welcome to chapel. Yeah, it's great to be here. My name is David Jansen. I'm the president at Tabor College, and I get to do the introduction today of our chapel. Let me just start with saying I love standing there greeting you as you come in. I love seeing your smiling faces, and it's just great to be able to come together as we do a couple of times a week. And so I think you're in for a real treat today. Today's a little bit different than our normal chapel. We're not starting with worship music as we usually do. Today we have the Brenneman Lectures this morning and this evening, and so we have a special guest today. So what does that mean, the Brenneman Lecture? So Dr. Frank Brenneman was a professor of mathematics here at Tabor College for many years. I should have gotten what the number was. He was my professor and my advisor for many years, and some of his former students established a lectureship in his name, in his honor. And so that provides some funds to bring in every year a speaker on a topic related to mathematics or computing, something along those lines. And so that's what today is. It's a special day for me in particular. Our speaker today is Dr. Michael Hilton. Let me just preface it with this. One of the greatest joys as a professor, as a faculty member, is seeing your former students go off and thrive, do great things, sometimes things you never imagined they might do. And it brings great joy to faculty when they do it. And one of the interesting things, many of you will probably do this. It's very common that 5 years after you graduate, 10, 20 years, you're going to want to reconnect with one or more of your faculty and just let them know you turned out okay. Despite what maybe happened in a class or here or there. And I encourage you to do that. Your faculty will appreciate hearing from you in the future. Well, today is a part of that. Michael Hilton was one of my students. I will probably always remember the first day that I met Michael. I was a professor of computer science and software engineering at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. And during office hours one day, this very dapper, well-dressed young man, graduate student, showed up in my office and introduced himself, and he said, "I'm going to do my master's thesis with you." I said, "No, I am swamped. I have way too many advisees already. I have no room for another student. Let me give you a list of some other faculty names that you need to go and talk to." He said, "No, I don't think you heard me. I'm going to do my master's thesis with you." And he said, "Give me a paper or two to read, and I'll prove that it will be worth your while to work with me." And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Just give me some papers." I gave him some papers. Sure enough, he came back in a week, and he had read them. He had done his homework, and he studied. Eventually, yes, of course, I took him on as my master's student. And we published, I believe, 3 papers together, which is a remarkable feat for a master's student to publish like that. One of the papers, the last paper, we published and presented at the International Conference on Software Engineering, probably the top conference in the world in software engineering. He went on to do his PhD at Oregon State University, and I tried my best to hire him back to Cal Poly, but he had an offer at Carnegie Mellon University, where he is now a teaching professor of computer science in the Software and Societal Systems Department of the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University. To put that into context, Carnegie Mellon is rated as the #1, or at least tied for the #1 computer science program or school in the world. It's like playing for the Chiefs, right? Something like that, okay? It's a top computer science program in the world. And so it's a real privilege to have Michael here today and to share with you some of his stories and some of his hearts. And I invite you back tonight for probably a very different talk at 7 o'clock in the Heritage Lobby. And I encourage you to come back for that. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Hilton.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you for that introduction. I still call him Dr. Jansen or Dr. J, which is a fun, sports reference if you get that. It's great to be here in Kansas talking to you all. I will say that there is a huge power in just not taking no as an answer. Now, that's not always the right situation in life. Sometimes you do need to take a no, but persistence does, in fact, pay off. And I had heard a lot of great things about Dr. Jansen at the time, that he was one of the top professors, and he had a fantastic reputation in the department. I knew that he was a Christian, and I knew that's what I wanted out of life. And so, sometimes you don't always get the first answer you get is not always the answer you want, and it's okay sometimes to push through that. So I am a teaching professor at the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University. This is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so go Steelers. Sorry if you're a Chiefs fan, I'm sorry. We can hopefully still be friends, but it's going to be hard. I have to admit that. And so Carnegie Mellon is the #1 rated school in computer science. There are some ratings that have another school in Boston with the letters M, I, and T in the name that rank them #1, but their rankings are flawed. We don't accept those rankings. And but we are famous for a lot of things you might have used every day, but are famous in computer science. So basically, we claim to be the birthplace of emojis. So maybe you have used an emoji in your life, probably in the past. Some of you are probably using emojis at this very instant. We also had some of the first self-driving cars at CMU. But probably for your generation, something that's more meaningful and impactful than all of those is we are also have a significant drama program. So we are the home of Josh Gad, who is the voice of Olaf in Frozen. So without CMU, Frozen wouldn't be what it is today. So that's also part of our claim to fame. Wow, Frozen is what gets the applause, not anything else. So that's fine. You can applaud for Frozen. That's okay. Okay, sure. Go ahead. Let's give Frozen a round of applause. I figured that would resonate with this audience. That's about the right. One thing that's hard about being a professor is, your pop culture references start aging out. So I start, make references to things, and then you realize people you're talking to weren't born when that thing happened, and it's a challenge we have to deal with. And they say growing old is no fun, but it beats the alternative. So maybe one day you'll be in my place, looking back at all those kids in college these days. So. I am a professor of computer science. I write research papers. I do my research on flaky tests, which is when automated tests pass and fail non-deterministically based on the state of the system and the state of the universe. And we come up with ways to diagnose and predict this using machine learning and other techniques. And we come up with remediation techniques. I'm guessing that's probably not the thing that most of you woke up today thinking, wow, I'd really like to hear some in-depth discussion of flaky test research. I also do research on the use of AI in education. Many of you are probably aware of this thing called AI that is happening in the world, and that it has implications on how people learn and how people, writing a paper now in college is different than maybe it was when I was in college. When I was in college, there wasn't ways to automatically generate papers. I'm sure none of you know of this or have ever thought of doing this at all, but there are other people in the world who use AI tools to generate their homework for them. I don't know if I should even say something like that, but that is a thing that happens. And so this is having consequences and impact on the world. And tonight in the lecture, I want to talk a little bit about what should our position as Christians be towards AI, and think about some of the implications about AI. Some of you may have heard the term AGI, artificial general intelligence, this idea that we could come up with an AI that will take over the world and all this sort of thing. And maybe you've seen the movie AI, or many of these movies where the artificial intelligence kind of breaks loose and takes over things. I'll be talking about that stuff tonight. It'll be not a super technical topic. I would invite you all to come. I think that I will explain all my technical terms. I think anybody who has a cursory understanding of where AI is at the moment, just as a user, will be able to follow along with the talk. And so I invite you all to come back to that talk tonight, and I'd love to see as many of you as possible. But I'm not going to go into technical. This is not going to be a technical talk. This is just going to be more talk of my story, and kind of to share how I got here. I'm also an academic advisor, so I have 50 to 100 academic advisees. I also teach a series of classes on software engineering. And one thing I do is I often tell my students that They can come and talk to me about anything they want to talk to me about, and whether they've been my advisee or whether they just are a student in my class, I offer them to come and talk to me. And I would say I get some technical questions, but even more than technical questions, I get a lot of questions from students about, I don't know what to do in this situation. The vast majority of students have either an internship offer, or they're trying to get an internship offer, or they have maybe a job offer, maybe they have multiple job possibilities, maybe they don't, and they're trying to navigate kind of these decisions that they're making in life. And this is really, really tricky and really hard. And so that's kind of what I want to talk to you all today about, is about what kind of how I got to here, how God has led and guided me in my personal and professional journey, and hopefully some takeaways from that. So I will go ahead and I want to read a little bit from Psalm 25, if you don't mind. Unfortunately, as you get older, things like reading glasses become a necessity, so it's coming for you too. Psalm 25. In you, Lord my God, I put my trust. I trust in you. Do not let me be put to shame, nor let my enemies triumph over me. No one who hopes in you will ever be put to shame, but shame will come on those who are treacherous without cause. Show me your ways, Lord. Teach me your paths. Guide me in your truth and teach me, for you are my God and my Savior. My hope is in you all day long. Remember, Lord, your great mercy and love, for they are from old. Do not remember the sins of my youth and my rebellious ways according to your love. Remember me, for you, Lord, are good. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore he instructs sinners in his ways. He guides the humble in what is right and teaches them his way. All the ways of the Lord are loving and faithful towards those who keep the demands of his covenant. For the sake of your name, Lord, forgive my iniquity, though it is great. Who then are those who fear the Lord? He will choose them in the ways they should choose. He will instruct them in the ways they should choose. They will spend their days in prosperity, and their descendants will inherit the land. The Lord confides in those who fear him. He makes his covenant known to them. My eyes are ever on the Lord, for he only will release my feet from the snare. I'm just going to pray quickly for today. Dear God, we thank you for these words. We pray that you would be with us today. I pray that my story would be helpful and useful to these students. I pray that you would lead and guide them and just in their lives and in so many decisions that are spread out before them. We thank you for this opportunity to be here today in this moment, in this place, and with this group of people. Amen. So I have a question for you all. I know this is a Mennonite school. I know many of you you don't necessarily have to be Mennonite to come to this school. So I would like to see a show of hands if you personally identify as Mennonite, whatever that means to you. But if you do identify as Mennonite, please raise your hand. I'm curious how many. Okay, so 20% maybe, something like that. Okay, cool. I am not Mennonite. I grew up in a Baptist family. However, I did marry a Mennonite, so I'm kind of Mennonite-ish or Mennonite adjacent. I have been to a lot of MCC sales. I hope I don't have any, stereotypes, but I kind of assume that the dining hall is just a giant pile of zwieback and borscht soup every single day. So I don't know if that's actually true or not, but that's not what they just serve here. Okay. My wife's grandmother actually was named Helen Suderman, and she came to Tabor College in the 1940s. So she was here from, I believe, 41 to 43. She met a fellow in California, and they were pen pals. He was occupied in Europe, as many young American men were during the early 1940s. We still have their letters, which were written on this super thin victory paper, it was called, because he was in the military. He was a conscientious objector, so he worked in a hospital unit, helping as I don't know exactly what the title was, but he helped in a hospital situation there. And then they later married after the war, and then they gave birth to several children, one of which was my wife's mother, and now his name was Dave Koop, so then it was the Koops, and then my wife is a Kaufman because her mom married a Kaufman, so this is kind of I've been around a lot of Mennonite stuff, so that's a little bit of my connection to Tabor College. Helen Suderman / Coop was I knew her later in life. She was an amazing woman, a fantastic woman. We, in fact, named our first child after her. Our daughter's name is Elena, which is the Spanish version of the word Helen. And so she's had a huge influence in my life, even as someone who is downstream from her. So I owe ultimately a lot to, I know it's not only Tabor College, but is a part of our family history. So I'm going to start, just kind of tell you my story, and we'll go from there. So I was born in California. I was born in Bakersfield, California, which is, it's a great place to be from. They say it's more like Texas than Texas itself. If you haven't been to Bakersfield, if you love oil wells, you will love Bakersfield, California. Then my dad was working at the railroad. Then later on, and we moved around a bunch. And when I was 7 years old, we moved to Spain, and I grew up in Spain. My parents were missionaries there, so I developed a lifelong love of soccer while I was there. So I am a Sevilla Football Club guy to the heart. So if you follow soccer at all, we've had some good years. We're having some down years, but we'll be back. And I lived in Spain till I was 17 years old. So I speak Spanish, and yeah, I'm actually excited. I don't know if you care about this, but I have to say it because I'm very excited. On Sunday, so I'm flying back to Pittsburgh soon. On Sunday, I'm taking my family, my kids. We have 4 kids. My wife and I have 4 kids, ages 16 to 8, and we're going to be flying and taking them back to Spain for the first time and spending 2 weeks in Spain, so during spring break. So it's going to be really, really fun, and I'm really looking forward to all the tapas that we're going to be eating there. It's going to be a great time. So I lived in Spain. I moved back. I was homeschooled when I was in Spain. I was a missionary kid, and I was homeschooled. So I was homeschooled all the way through till I stopped being homeschooled. It's not really there was not a real strict cutoff like there might be in a more traditional high school. I took the California High School Proficiency Exam as a way to kind of cap my homeschooling experience. It was a test that the state of California would give that would allow you to essentially have the equivalent of a high school diploma. It was not super hard for me being a homeschooler, but this was partially because I was, sober while I was taking the test, which is probably not something that everybody else in the room could say. I also didn't have to take smoke breaks every 30 seconds, which also helped me concentrate on the test. So I did that successfully. From there, I started going to Grossmont Community College, which is a community college in the San Diego, California area. We used to sarcastically call it Harvard on the Hill because it was up a little bit off the hill. I would not equate it necessarily with Harvard, but I went there for 2 years and I got an associate's degree. I'm very proud of the fact that I have one more degree than most of my colleagues. So most of the people I work with have a PhD, a master's, and a bachelor's degree, which I have all of those degrees, but I also have an associate's degree. And I'm very proud of that fact. Yes, I am proud of that fact. And Grossmont College was a great experience for me. I learned a ton. I had some very, very caring instructors. Community college professors get paid, I think, maybe $7 a year or something like that. And so this means that the vast majority were there because they cared about the students and they really wanted to make a difference in their lives. And I had at least as meaningful instruction opportunities there as I've had at other much larger, much more reputable institutions. So as I tell my story, I want to kind of pull out some moments where I felt like God was leading and guiding me. If we kind of go back here to Psalms 25, I want to pull out this one verse that says, verse 12 says, "Who then are those who fear the Lord? He will instruct them in the way they should choose." And I think lots of times in life we have things that we have to make choices, and we don't really know what we should do for the choice. And so there's a couple times in my life when I've had choices to make, and one of these choices was when I was transferring from Grossmont to San Diego State University. They had what was called a transfer agreement guarantee. So if you completed 2 years successfully at the community college, they would transfer you to the 4-year state college, right? And so I'm revealing my age here a bit. This was in the last millennium. This was not even in this current millennium. And when we transferred in, you had to declare a major. And then major, you declared on a physical piece of paper. There was a checkbox, a series of checkbox, and you had to check the actual checkbox for the major on the series of paper. So I had just done kind of general studies as an undergrad or as a community college student. And I like science, I like math. I was kind of nerdy, as I probably still am. And so I looked at the list of things, and I really liked history, but I wanted to be able to get a job. And so I didn't choose history. Sorry if you're a history professor here. I really liked math, but I don't know, I wasn't that nerdy, so sorry again if you're a math person. So I didn't choose math, and I was like, computer science. I like computers, right? So I had played some computer games. I had done some things on computers. I'd fixed a couple computers, like, taken them apart. At that time, you had to build your own computer. You bought the parts and you had to build it. So I had assembled some computers by screwing some screws in. So clearly I felt like, computer science was for me. So I checked the computer science box. Plus, I knew there was jobs in computer science and I wanted a job, so I did that. So technically speaking, the first day of classes, I was a junior in computer science at San Diego State University, and I had taken exactly 0 computer science classes in my entire life. So I wouldn't recommend this as a primary path through your degree program, but it was interesting. I had to take most of my classes concurrent enrollment, so I would take like programming 1 and programming 2 together at the same time, and then I would take data structures and that's together. I have a lot of fond memories of those times. We would drink Red Bull and eat Snickers to try to help us study for longer. I don't know if any of you have experienced this sort of a thing, but we had an operating systems class where we were building an operating system for a computer, and we had one of these projects where we worked on it like overnight, and then we went home and slept for a couple hours, and then we came back and worked. So we worked like, I don't know, basically 2 or 3 whole days. My lab mate, the person who was working with me, he drank like 6 Red Bulls during this time, and he broke out in hives and went to the hospital from an allergic reaction. So, be safe out there. Don't drink too many Red Bulls / Monster energy drinks or whatever it is. From personal experience, I can tell you this is not great. So I love school so much that I decided to stick around an extra semester. And so partially this was all the things were stacked up. So I finished in 2001. I finished all my coursework. Then I went to go graduate, and they said, oh, you forgot to pay the $35 graduation fee, so you're not allowed to graduate. This was a little disappointing to me. I was like, can I just pay a fine or something? They're like, no, you just have to wait. So I ended up graduating the next semester after that. So I had this kind of little break in my life. And during this time, I was working at a church. And this was a large church in San Diego, and I was doing their tech support because that's what you do when you're in computer science and you need an easy job. So I was fixing people's computers and helping out, and one day, this guy comes into my office, and he says, you know what? He's like, Michael. He's like, I think my computer is possessed. He's like, I think there might be a demon in my computer. This is what he said. And I'm like, okay. And so he's like, it's acting on its own. I'm not doing anything, and it's completely acting on its own. So I said, okay, let me take a look at it. So I come and take a look at it, and I said, well, I don't know what spiritual warfare is happening around your computer, but I do think if we just take this book off the space bar, then the cursor will stop jumping all around. And sure enough, it worked. So, that was the type of work I was doing. But I had at the time I was thinking I wanted to become a minister, that I was going to go into the ministry. I was working for this church. They had a position open. They thought that I thought I was going to get that position. And I interviewed for the position, and they said no. They went in a different direction. And this was hard for me at the time, right? I thought that I had decided what I was going to do, and I thought I had a plan kind of going forward, and the plan kind of fell apart on me. And this is difficult and tricky. And when you're young, and I was out of college, I didn't really have a goal or a plan. It was hard for me. And if you're in a situation where you think you know what's going to happen, and suddenly what you think is going to happen is not actually what's going to happen, this can be very, very difficult and very tricky, right? So I was unemployed. I didn't have a job. I didn't have school anymore, so I didn't have a lot going on. But one of the pastors at the church decided, or had heard somehow he got challenged, and he decided he was going to read the Bible in a month. So I am a competitive individual, and I'm like, if Kyle can read the Bible in a month, I can definitely read the Bible in a month, right? And I had nothing going on, so I bought a Bible. I bought a New Living because it's a little bit more readable translation, and I opened it up to the end, found the number of pages, divided those number of pages by 30 or 31, I forget what it was. It would have been April, I believe, so I divided by 30, and I read the entire Bible in a month. This was a really, really fascinating and interesting experience. I would challenge you to do this if you have the time and the ability to do that. It took me about 3 hours a day reading, which is a lot of reading, but is not overwhelming amount of reading. Especially if you have a time where you're on a break or something. I would encourage you to do this. It was a dramatically different experience reading the Bible in a month than reading it on a different time scale. So I had read the Bible before. After then, when I started at Cal Poly, I started reading the Bible out loud to my kids. We would do mostly a chapter a day, or mostly every day we would do a chapter. So most days we would do a chapter, I would say. And we read through the Bible as a family in 10 years. So that's a little bit different time scale over 1 month versus 10 years. And I will say the 1 month timeline is such an incredible and different experience. Basically you read all of Genesis in 1 day. And if you read the stories in Genesis, like say Noah's Ark, and you just read it in isolation, it feels like, wow, almost feels kind of vindictive of God to do this. Like, it feels very like God is being very temperamental and like way over the top, and like, why is he doing this? This feels too much. But when you read all of Genesis, the violence and the depravity is completely overwhelming. And by the time you get to these stories of judgment, you're like, wow, yes, thankfully, finally someone's doing something about all these horrible things that are happening in the world, right? And I think that there's an interesting, this isn't the main point I'm making, but since we're talking about it, I want to bring up this point, that there's this really, I think for Christians, oftentimes we don't really know what to do about judgment in the Bible. And I think one way to think about it is you have to understand if there are really evil and horrible things in the world, which I believe there are and I have seen in my life, right? Then we need judgment because we want someone to stand up and say, this is not okay. It is not acceptable to treat people who are less powerful than you in these ways. And it is really important. And so, anyway, that's kind of a side point, but I had a few extra minutes, so I get to make a couple side points along the way. So I think that's an interesting point. So I would challenge you, as a side note, to read the Bible in a month. If you do, I would love it if you emailed me. My email is mhilton, my first name, last name, first initial, last name, at cmu.edu. You can Google me, Michael Hilton, CMU, and I will easily come up. And if you do read it, just email me and tell me you did. I would love to discuss it with you. I will buy you virtually a Starbucks or something if you read the Bible in a month and share something with me about what you did. So at the end of the month, I was approaching Revelation, and I just had a sense that God was going to do something in my life. I didn't know what it was. And the day I finished, I got a job offer from a U.S. government research lab to be a research scientist. I had not even ever technically applied. I had given my resume to a friend who said he was going to apply for me about 9 months before, and heard zero between handing a friend a physical copy of my resume 9 months before to actually getting the offer the day I finished reading the Bible. And so I felt like, to me, this was God speaking to me, that this was the path he had for me, and this is what he wanted me to do. So I took that job. So I worked for 9 years for the Department of Defense as a civil servant. If you follow the news at all, there's a lot going on with the civil service and government employees. This is what I did. This was my job. I was a government employee. I was a civilian employee of the United States Navy, working in a lab, working on different projects. I worked on a classified project that then President Obama was briefed on and said it was cool. So my entire life is going to be downhill from that point. I'll never, do better than the President of the United States saying my work is cool. But, whatever. It's life. And so I worked there for 10 years, and at the end of the 10 years, I was kind of getting to the point where I had had enough of that situation, and I wanted to move on. And I was trying to decide what I should do and where I should go. And I just started thinking about things. And one thing that really impacted me, that helped me in this thinking, was a movie called Chariots of Fire. Has anyone seen Chariots of Fire? You have all probably seen the intro scene. It's heavily parodied with they're running in the slow motion and they're playing the theme song that you would all recognize. I will not sing it to you. Don't worry, your eardrums will not start bleeding. No, you don't. Trust me, you don't want that. And so but in the movie, this movie is about a guy named Eric Liddell. He raced in the Olympics in 1930s. He was a Christian. He was a Scottish Presbyterian, which I now go to a Presbyterian church, so maybe I'll claim a little bit of this. He decided he didn't want to race on Sundays. He didn't think that was appropriate, so he did not race his best event, which was the 100-meter dash on Sundays, but he ended up winning the 200-meter dash that was on Saturday. It's a great story. But in this movie, he's talking to somebody, and there's this line in the movie that says, he eventually went on to become a missionary, went to China, then was interned in a camp in China during the occupation of China by the Japanese forces during World War II. He passed away in the prisoner of war camp. But he's kind of deciding whether he should go run in the Olympics before going to be a missionary or just go be a missionary. And there's this line in the movie that's super powerful, that stuck with me my whole life, where he tells someone, he goes, you know what, God made me, but he also made me fast, right? And he had this gift of speed, which I do not have. I am not a 100-meter dash person, right? But I think a lot of us have something, right? So God made you, but he also made you something, right? And what is that something? What has God given you that makes you special? And I think for me, God has made me, and he made me to serve him, but he also made me good at computer science. And this is what I'm good at. I'm not good at singing. I'm not good at running. I have the athletic ability that you would expect from a middle-aged computer science professor. But I'm good at computer science, right? And I don't expect all of you to be good at computer science, but I'm sure some of you, but you're all good at something. You all have something that God has made you good at. And I think a huge part of life is figuring out what is that thing. And I think you should think about that kind of in a holistic way. It's not just about kind of having your Christian, religious life here and then your secular life here, and they're totally different, right? God made you as a whole person, and all of the talents and gifts and abilities he has given you, you can use for him. And you can use those talents for him as a college professor. You can use those talents for him as a social worker. You can use those talents as a professional Christian or as a pastor, right? But there's not a hierarchy of jobs in the Bible. Now, obviously, you shouldn't be doing stuff that's immoral, unethical, and illegal, and if your job involves that, you should not do it, right? So I'm not advocating you become a Christian pimp, for example, right? But there are lots of jobs that can be done in a way that honors God, and I think that we can teach computer science in a way that honors God, and we can teach computer science in a way that doesn't, but almost every job can be done that way. And so I think that, another kind of lesson I've learned along the way is when you're thinking about what to do with your life, kind of be thoughtful about what you're good at. Try new things. Try taking classes that maybe you don't think you're going to be good at, right? You are at this key inflection point in your life in college where you can just go and take a class on whatever, right? You can take a writing class. You can take a business class. You can take an entrepreneurship class. Maybe you're no good at it. That's okay. But you won't know until you try. Maybe you try it and you're wonderful, amazing. Maybe I was a junior in computer science with 0 computer science classes in my entire life, and I'm now a computer science professor at the top-rated computer science school in the world, right? There is no way as a sophomore, having taken 0 computer science classes, if you would have told me that I was going to be a professor of computer science at the best computer science school in the world, I would have literally laughed in your face, right? I was at computer science. I would have assumed, I was at community college. I would have assumed you were high. This was San Diego, so there were some students who would pop out of class to enjoy a little extracurricular activities. But I would have never seen that coming. And maybe where you end up in 20 years from now is not something that you see coming at all. And that's totally okay. And I think it's okay to try new things when you're in college and think about, try some stuff. And it's not all going to work out. I tried some stuff that I was really bad at. I took music classes, and it was just a total waste of everyone's time, right? And I took art classes, and I enjoyed it, but I'm not good at art, right? So branch out. Try some classes that you wouldn't otherwise try. Think about what you can learn along the way. I also think that it is important to get a well-rounded education and to know about things, even if that's not the thing you're going to be doing forever. Sorry, I'm just going to check my notes here real quick. I feel like I'm way off on a tangent now. This is what the vast majority of my classes are like, by the way. I talk about it when I was asked earlier before we were setting up how I was going to end the session, and my answer was, well, my talks are more like jazz than classical music, right? Classical music is all written ahead of time, and jazz is improvisational. So we'll all find out together how this talk ends. It was my answer. So that's where we are right now. I'm working at that job. I'm kind of getting a little burnt out at that. I'm kind of finishing my first career, and I really was thinking about what I want to do next. God made me, but he also made me fast. So I was good at computer science. I seemed to be good at teaching people and helping other people. I enjoyed that more than sitting behind a desk programming all day. And so I took a leap of faith. I quit my job. I moved up to San Luis Obispo, which was about 6 hours away from where I lived in San Diego with my family. At the time, I had a wife and 2 kids. And I started going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I met Dr. Jansen. I worked with him. I figured out that he was the guy I wanted to work with. I was persistent. I didn't let him say no, and I got to be able to work with him. I had a fantastic experience working with him. We did a good job. We published some papers, including in the top conferences. And at the time, I had started to hear about this school called CMU that once I kind of got into computer science, it's kind of a big deal in computer science. And so I applied. And I wanted to go do a PhD there. I wanted to do a PhD, so I applied there. I thought, hey, let's try it, see how it goes. And they said no. They rejected me. That was a little bit like, oh, okay. Again, I thought I kind of had this plan going forward, and it didn't work out. And, I guess the joke's on them. Now I'm there for a lot longer than if I had done a PhD. But so I ended up going to Oregon State, did my PhD up there. Go Beavers. If you are a Ducks fan, we definitely can't be friends. And so I went to Oregon State. I did my PhD at Oregon State. While I was in Oregon State, I was a student volunteer at a conference where you just kind of show up and you help kind of manage the conference and kind of do just the jobs that need to make the conference run. And while I was there, it started raining. This was Portland, Oregon, so it rains all the time. And it was raining, and they needed somebody to go to Costco and buy 1,500 umbrellas to pass out to conference attendees. And so there was a student volunteer who was there and me, and I said, sure, I'll go help. I know where Costco is. So we got in a car, we drove down to Costco, we bought a pallet and a half of umbrellas at Costco and brought them back to the conference and handed them out. And this person turned out to be one of my best friends in academia. We've since published many papers at the top venues. We continually do research together. He's been to my house, I've been to his. We know our families know each other. He's now what I would consider a personal and a professional friend. The next year after that conference, at the same conference, I volunteered again. They needed someone to help run the video stuff where they were recording videos of the talks, and so they asked me to take charge of that. I took charge of that. I volunteered and said, sure, I'll help with this. That next year, the conference was in Pittsburgh. The head of the conference, the person running the whole thing, was a faculty member at CMU. I got to know him fairly well from volunteering on the conference, and I think I did a pretty good job. I worked hard. It was the first time doing that, and so it worked out well at the conference. Then a year later, he found out I was on the job market, and he reached out to me and said, hey, we have this job application. We think you should apply for it. And so I did, and they offered me a job. I got several job offers. The other job offer boiled down to Cal Poly. And I just felt like Cal Poly wasn't the right place for me. I felt like the choice that I needed to make was CMU. And so, there was some reasons for this. Obviously, just being at CMU is a bigger platform. You get invited to give, distinguished lecture talks more likely at CMU than at other schools. It's just a thing that happens. And so I went there. And it was a good experience. 2 years after I went to CMU, my wife was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of blood cancer. Our house was a block away from one of the top 5 cancer-rated hospitals in the whole country. And so she received excellent care. Thankfully, she is now no evidence of disease, which means that there's no evidence of her cancer anymore. And that is a huge blessing. Thank you. But when I was making this job, this was nowhere near crossed my mind to think about what are the hospitals that are available in the place you're going to live. But clearly, in retrospect, God had put us there partially because being literally 2 blocks away from the hospital made things so much easier going through treatment and going through this hard time, right? And so sometimes maybe the choices you're making, God is preparing you for something that's hard and something that's difficult, and maybe you don't need to know today, or maybe you wouldn't be able to handle it today if you knew what you're going to have to do in life. And I don't want to make it sound like everything is going to be roses and sunshine along the way. There are things that are going to be hard in your life, and it's probably good that you don't know all the hard things that will happen in your life today, but God will be there with you, and God will protect you. I see that we are getting towards the end of our time, so we will bring this thing in for a landing. So what can we do out of this? What can you take away from this today? And I think I have a print up in my office at CMU that I really like, and it's a print of this verse. And I think I want to leave you with this verse as a way for you to have something to take away from today's lecture. So what do you do with this? There's a lot of choices. God will lead you and guide you. It's not always clear what you need to do. So let me boil it down to one piece of advice. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Let's pray. Dear God in heaven, we thank you for today. We thank you for every person that's here. I thank you for my story and for all the twists and turns along the way. I thank you for blessing me and my family. I pray, Lord, that you would use this story to bless the people here. I pray that you would help us to love mercy, to walk humbly before you, to seek justice. I pray for these students that you will help them along the paths of their life, that you will make your way clear to them, and that you will lead and guide them. I thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and we lift all our prayers up in the name of your Son. Amen.